So thank you for having me all here. It's wonderful to be in Mexico City. This is my first time in Mexico City. I've only been to Tijuana before. I have family in San Diego, so this has been a wonderful, wonderful few days so far. Thank you for the introduction, Rodrigo, wherever you went. Thank you. Yes, we've had the good fortune to work together for many years now. I've been with Kineo for over 15 years. And as Rodrigo said, I've been doing digital learning design long before we called it e-learning. So in another century like Lars, in the 1900s. Back in the 1900s, I started in this industry. So I'm going to share hopefully some tips today that will get you excited. Who in this room is responsible for the design and development of self-paced e-learning modules, digital learning that your employees have to take? A few of you. Yes, many. That's why you're here. Great. Okay, we're in the right room. So let's get started. That's me. We're going to talk about designing engaging e-learning. So some practical tips that you can apply to create more impactful experiences. We've been talking about having impact. At Kineo, we call it designing for results. We want to make sure that the custom learning experiences that we're creating for employees are really having the impact on the business that we want to have. And it's all about making sure that you're not boring your learners to tears and that they actually are getting something practical out of the experience that they can take back to the job and apply. It's all about application. So as we set the stage, it's a whole new world, right? There's a lot going on with technology. And nonetheless, we want to make sure that the employees that are coming to our e-learning, Jose, Juan, Bob, is saying, man, that was a great e-learning experience. How would you answer this? How would you all answer this today? And you can talk amongst yourselves. You can, if we want to do microphones. What does engaging e-learning look like to you?
Short and sweet.
Short and sweet. We have time-poor employees who do not want to be bothered, right? Why? Because they actually want to do their jobs. Yeah. What else makes for engaging e-learning?
You give me a tool. I have a new tool to use in my daily work.
It's something that you can use in your daily work. So it has to have relevance and application, be something you can apply back onto the job. These are great, great ideas. So as we get into it today, we're going to dig down into this, and we're going to talk about why does understanding the needs of our audience matter? We really need to understand who we're designing for. What are those key ingredients of engagement? Some of these things, what would Bob say? You know, it's short and sweet, it's applicable. How to use activities in a meaningful way to ensure engagement and also transfer back onto the job. And then ways to get personal. And we heard Lars talking about that earlier, right? How to personalize learning experiences so that people don't feel like you are wasting their time. Nobody wants to have their time wasted. So why does it matter that you understand who your audience is? Why does the audience matter? So think about it now. How are you currently discovering who your audience is, their motivations, the environment in which they work? Are you just listening to the stakeholders? Are you out there talking to people? How are you all doing this now? And we can think about some ways that we do this. There's a lot on this slide, so I'll talk through this kind of high level. But first, we can ask our audience. We can understand if you're teaching a particular skill or task, what is the hardest part? What are the barriers for you to get this right? What do you do when you get stuck now? How do you feel about this? Where are you likely to be when you learn, particularly for some of you talking about frontline employees working in the textile industry, right? They're not going to be sitting at a computer. We need to understand the environment in which the people are learning. Ask our business leaders, what's the business goal? How do you know that this particular area needs improvement? What does good look like for the business? And what do you need people to be able to do? Ultimately, we are talking about performance on the job. We want to make sure that we are sharing information and knowledge that's going to help them do what they need to do in a real world situation, not just the manual or the policy, but thinking about how to apply it. We can observe our audience. We can watch them do it. We can have them walk us through it. Talk to your best practitioners and find out how they're doing these particular tasks. Learn what their best practices are. And maybe watch the people who are not so good, who are getting stuck on it, because then you can understand where the mistakes are being made. And that's really important. A lot of where we want to focus our content experiences is on those mistakes that people make, right? So we can mitigate risk. We can improve performance by concentrating on those 5 things that people always get wrong. Instead of teaching everything, we could focus on the mistakes. So talk me through what can go wrong. We can ask that. And then, of course, we also want to review the data. So what are those, your KPIs, key performance indicators? Is that a Spanish term? KPIs. So look at your retention rates. You talked about employee retention, sales data, customer feedback, internal feedback. So understanding what is the data that really matters to your business. So these are just some suggestions for getting to know your audience. We've done a lot of work with audience personas. Elucidat is a company, they're an authoring tool company, and I actually did a version of this presentation with Kirsty Greeny from Elucidat. They share some amazing information, and they have a capture guide that's really useful. I don't know if it's translated into Spanish, but it can help you dive down into understanding who that audience is, so that when you are then designing a solution, you're tailoring it to them and really trying to solve the needs that they have. All right, so we're going to move on. Ingredients of engagement. This is the fun part. This is like the secret recipe to how we make better learning experiences. So we talked a little bit about what what would make Bob excited about your e-learning. Not that it's just so short and sweet, right? We don't want it to be too short. There's a lot of talk in the industry about micro-learning. I've even heard people use the term nano-learning. Right? At some point, we actually do have to have thoughtful, deep content experiences that maybe take time, right? Learning takes time, and we want to keep that top of mind. So don't make it so short that it's not useful. But what does it mean to make it engaging? I paid attention to it at the end of it. It was interesting to me. I can do something with this. It's memorable, right? I'm going to actually remember this. I might even tell somebody else about it. Content that goes viral within your company. Has anyone had that experience? People are talking about it at the virtual water cooler. That's amazing. You know you're having impact when people can remember it like that. This applies to my world. It's relevant to my job. It's not the 800 things that everybody at our company needs to do, but I only need to know 20 of them. Don't give me the other 780 of them, right? Keep it relevant to me. It got me thinking. Perhaps it got me reflecting on my work, and I was involved with it. So we've made it active. We've made it an active experience that they can actually connect with. So these are some real things that we can do in our content, and it's about more than sharing information. It's really getting into that practical application bit. So how do employees define engaging? This is data. Elucidat has been doing a lot of great state of digital learning reports. You can find their information online. Unengaging information. It's out of date. It's irrelevant. It's lacking that relevance. It's passive. I just sit there and I watch it, or I just sit there and I listen and I don't do anything. It's hard to find and use. Lots of text on the screen, right? That's boring. One of the things, actually, Lars had the beautiful pyramid, the learning maturity model, right? And at the bottom, there's compliance, right? These are organizations that are just kind of ticking the box. And often we find at that level of maturity, there's a lot of text on screen in the e-learning courses because we just want to push out all of this content. And it's boring. We're ticking a box. As you get up into what was the mid-tier? It was learner-centric, right? That's where we want to start. We want to start making our content more learner-centric, focused on the individual, making sure that the content is relevant, that it's accurate, that it's interesting, it's interactive, it's short and focused, to that point about short and sweet. And ideally, it looks visually rich and aligned to your brand, too. I think in the case study, she was talking about making sure that it really looked like the different brands, Roberts and men's fashion, right? So you see yourself, you see your business, your company, and that's represented through not only the logos and the images you use, but also the language you use, making sure that you're speaking in the tone of your organization. Some companies are more formal, and some companies are a little looser, and you want to align your language to those people so that they really see themselves in it and feel seen and heard, and it's easy for them to access the material. So these can be some words you can really take to heart. Take these away. These are the words to take away. How do we do this? So can we, and we'll look at some examples now. This is the fun part. So this was a program for Snapchat, which is a social media company. Obviously, lots of fun working with Snapchat. They have an amazing brand. This is their code of conduct training for all of their employees across the organization. And core to their code of conduct is being kind. And that's, kind of their core value proposition within their employees, but that's also what they're trying to promote now with their product. And as you can imagine, a lot of social media companies have a lot of controversy right now. They're trying to kind of level set. Being kind, core to them. So visually rich, this really looks like their brand. So we've kind of connected with them with that. But we're also finding ways to tell a lot of stories. That makes it relatable and connectable. Stories are what sticks in our minds. We are human beings. We want to hear stories. I would much rather see how Javier applies the information and security privacy policy at his organization than to read the policy. Who wants to read the policy? No. But what's important that employees can do? That they can, in a given situation, understand what's the right thing to do that is aligned to our policy. So if we tell lots of stories and examples and share with them how to transfer this back to their world, it's going to be stickier and it's going to be more engaging, and they're going to say, that was interesting, that was memorable, I can do something with this, right? All right, so snaps for Snapchat. Here's another example, making it immersive and relatable. So this is a short scenario-focused module. We're teaching employees who are new line managers. I've never managed a team before. My name is Sue. I was an individual contributor at my organization, and now I have a team of 5 people who report to me, and I have to balance doing my job and helping them, managing them, delegating to them, et cetera. So we drop you into the situation. Meet Sue. Sue took on this manager role just over 2 months ago after being an individual contributor for a couple of years. She's excited for the new responsibilities, and she cares a lot for the employees who now report to her. It hasn't been easy, though. So we're going to help her navigate through a bunch of decision points in this experience. So we set up the scene, and then we have to help Sue decide what to do. So again, this is about keeping it application-based. How do you do that skill in the real world? And creating a relatable story and a relatable character that's aligned to your organization to the best that you can. So I think that's engaging. And it can be engaging with just text and graphics. Right? Sometimes there's a lot of pressure to have what I call, it's kind of the, I don't know if this is a term, jazz hands of e-learning, right? Like, woohoo, this is really exciting, and there's lots of animation happening, and we've got flashing stars and music coming in. And ultimately, that can be really distracting. I call it clicky, clicky, bling, bling. Right? So we want to avoid that. No clicky, clicky, bling, bling in your learning experience. You probably cannot translate that one. You don't need to. But we want to make sure that we're not adding a lot of elements to the experience that are ultimately going to distract the learner. If all they remember is the jazz hands and they don't remember the content or how to apply it, then you've actually failed. So be careful with flashing stars and flying in animations and a lot of, even just a lot of animations that don't add to the content experience. Text and graphics can be amazing for keeping you focused and on track. Can we make a connection? to you as a person. This was a program for AARP, which is the American Association for Retired People. So they do a lot of advocacy and lobbying in the US, and a lot of support and services to protect seniors. And there's a lot of fraud happening right now in the US, I'm sure in other countries as well, where people are getting scammed out of lots of money. So this program is teaching bank tellers and financial advisors how to identify signs of fraud. So a customer comes into your bank and they have a young man at their side, and he is her nephew, and he's holding her arm really tight, and figuring out what are all the signs, and it turns out he's been stealing money from her all these years. So this course is to prevent that. And as we get into the experience, we're really trying to encourage this empathy with the people who are getting scammed. Empathy helps create action, right? We feel motivated to help individuals. So in this course, you choose who you want to help. And if you see up in the top corner, as we go through the experience, we're actually going to save this person money, which is kind of fun. So I choose Sandra. She looks like my mom. Actually, she looks more like me. Or Charles, I don't know. You find the person that you kind of identify with, and we are going to save that person money. So we've made this kind of empathetic connection. So that creates an element of engagement, right? And we also want to find ways to interact then in meaningful ways. And interaction doesn't have to mean, and hopefully it doesn't mean, just dragging and dropping things all over a screen. It's asking meaningful questions to help people really connect with the experience. This was a program for Travel and Leisure, which is a timeshare company, Wyndham Destinations. I don't know if that's a brand you all know down here. So the hospitality industry. And this is their required diversity, equity, and inclusion course. We called it Passport to Belonging, so I had a little fun with the storytelling and the narrative. And the question here is getting people to really think about how diversity, equity, and inclusion impacts you as an individual. So the question says, we are all human, but we are each unique. We take pride in our identity and who we are. Which element of you do you most love? So in answering this, I could say my personality, my religion, my heritage, my community. We're getting you to think about how these topics apply to you as an individual, and then you can kind of extrapolate that out to the people that you're working with. So engagement is about interacting in meaningful ways. Again, it's not the clicky, clicky, bling, bling. It can be a very simple question to get you thinking. Can we make it genuinely useful? Do I have a build? No. Okay, so for retail associates, she says, I only half fill stock carts with cold products, so I know I can get it all on the shelves in under 30 minutes. So that's what Sophia from California says. There's a video here. You see how it's done. Quick quiz. How many minutes are cold items allowed to be out of the refrigerator? And I'm guessing it's 30 minutes, right? Okay. So this is very, very focused on what you need to do. It's useful information. It's a useful interaction. We did not have the policy laid out and lots of text on screen, but keeping it really simple, accessible, applicable, and relevant. Am I saying the same words over and over again? Right? Because they matter. So keep these terms top of mind. What other forms of engaging e-learning come to mind for you all? Anything that I've missed so far? Video can be very engaging.
Podcast.
Yeah? What'd you say?
Podcast.
Podcasts. Ah, yes. Yeah, podcasts, right? A lot of us like to listen as we're walking. Are you doing podcasting at your organization? No?
But could be a good idea.
Yeah. So podcasts can be a good idea, but you need to understand your audience because it's not going to be applicable to everyone. I sometimes like to listen to podcasts, not all the time. Audiobooks, if I'm listening to a book, I start tuning out, right? So probably not the best way for me to learn. Lars talked about that a little bit this morning, about making sure that the content we deliver is available on multiple channels. That can also reinforce engagement, so that all your content is not just podcast, because that's not going to appeal to everyone or be suitable to everyone. Not all of your content is a policy, but some people might want to read the policy, and that's how they learn. I think particularly engineers, what I have found, engineers don't want all the fluff and the extra scenarios and things like that. They kind of just want to get down and do it, right? So this is why it's really important to understand who your audience is. You might need to make content available on multiple channels. It's not one size fits all. So creating experiences, and it sounds like it's going to be more work, right? And it might be, but if you really want to have that impact, that might be what we need to be doing as an L&D function, providing more options. All right, this is a good little tip. This is my favorite model, a little bit of a learning model. So if you are designing an engaging and effective e-learning experience and you don't know where to start, someone hands you a 200-slide PowerPoint deck and says, turn this into e-learning, and you're like, ay, how do I start? We can break it down into a very simple model. So I call step one is gaining attention. How do you hook the learner in? You might tell an insightful story. In compliance, historically, this has been done by, if you don't do this right, you could be fined billions of dollars. Those stories. Last year, this company, this happened, and this person went to jail, right? You pay attention because there's some stakes at it. But you could tell a story, shocking statistics, lots of different ways to hook people. A really good explainer video that just gives you an overview, helps you understand why. In English, we call it laying out the what's in it for me, WIFM. That's an acronym that what's in it for me. So we want people to understand why they need to pay attention to this. So find some meaningful hook to get them pulled in. Then we set direction. In this short experience, in this 5-minute experience, I'm going to lay out 5 tips for you so that you can design more effective e-learning. Does that sound like a good idea? And you go, yeah, okay. What a lot of instructional designers do, because they learned this in school or this is what they were told, is they have the boring screen of, at the end of this course, you will have learned to, and then you list all the learning objectives. And it's all usually in Bloom's taxonomy. Are you familiar with Bloom's taxonomy as an instructional design? So so some nodding of heads. So Bloom's taxonomy is a way to ensure when we are setting out to do instructional design that we are really identifying the learning objectives at the end of the experience. So you will learn to identify the 5 steps in the process and follow them in order. It's usually framed in really boring language, and most learners click right over it because it's boring. Instructional designers need learning objectives, but human beings who are at the other end of your computer just kind of want to know what they're going to get out of this experience. So can you tell them in a very simple way, in conversational language, what you're going to learn, how this is going to be applicable to you? So set direction, and part of that might be, this is a 10-minute experience. You might say, this is a 30-minute experience. We have a lot to cover. Parts of it might be kind of boring. That's okay, but this is going to really help you do your job because of X, Y, and Z. So you can be honest with them about what's going to happen too. Then we get into presenting the content. So those can be your slides, your screens, here's all the content information. You can do that in a variety of ways. That could be video, animation, text on screen, graphics, stories, etc. Exemplify and practice. Telling your story, giving them an opportunity to interact, to practice the skill, to answer scenario-based questions. So scenarios are a really great way for that exemplify and practice. Then we do our assessment. We summarize your key learning points and a call to action. That's really important. A call to action is, what are you going to do next out in the real world? And I hope for you all today that your call to action will be, I'm going to take one thing that I learned from today's events at Kineo, and I'm going to start applying that in my work to help transform our L&D function. right? What's that call to action so that you're inspiring the learner to take this out into the real world? So this is a really simple model. You can set up your learning content. That could be slide 2. Maybe this is 4 slides of content. You've got a few practice activities. You assess and summarize, call to action. That could be one short and sweet module, or your whole module could have a whole bunch of these together. Does that make sense? Okay. Awesome. We call it the knowledge and skills builder. You're sharing knowledge and teaching skills. Okay, well, let's dive down into activities. So one of the things that Elucidat survey came back with is people want more videos. They want more interactivity to help you practice what you are learning. So not just the information, but those opportunities to practice. So this can be tricky in self-paced learning, though, right? And it's where scenarios come into hand. And there's a difference between, I think this is a really important distinction. A lot of people write test questions, right? So a test question might be, what does ABC stand for at our company? Or what's step 3 of the process? And that's just knowledge and recall. It's not about application. So the difference between a test question and a practice activity is we're not just asking you to recall the information, but to be able to apply it, right? So again, scenario-based questions really help with that because you put someone in a situation and you say, here you are at the front desk of your hotel, and a customer comes to you and asks you, in a very irritated tone of voice, why there are no towels in your room, and will you give them a refund, and how should you respond? That's you can start seeing yourself in this situation, and that's a practice activity. It's not crazy with clicky anything. It could just be a simple multiple choice question. Now, Cathy Moore is a great resource if you're an instructional designer and you are building content and learning solutions yourself. Cathy Moore's book is called Map It, and her whole methodology is called action mapping. And that can really help you figure out what it is that you need to practice and how. She'll have you focus. If you read the book, this will make sense to you, but you really focus on what's the measurable goal, what is it that you're trying to get people to do, and then what are the activities that you can do to help them practice that. So highly recommend that book. That will give you a really solid framework for some of what we've been talking about here to identify those practice activities. All right, so let's see how we want to do this today. You're designing, so this is a little activity for us here. And I'm going to have you talk amongst yourselves. Can you do that? Will you be brave to talk to each other? Okay. So you're designing a soft skills training program for a new manager on giving difficult feedback. So this is a self-paced e-learning experience. What kinds of activities could you include in a self-paced e-learning experience to do that? Talk amongst yourselves and brainstorm some ideas. How would you do that? All right, here's another one. This is a little harder. So the skills training we're doing now is how to dress a shop window. Many of you are in retail here, right? So how would you do that? So it's customer assistance in a high street fashion brand. How are you going to do that in e-learning? What kinds of activities might you include for them? So again, talk amongst yourselves. Question. Are activities that make people think less important than activities that get people doing something? And I'm getting you to think right now, right? Oh, it's kind of a trick question. Really, really important to help people reflect on the experience. And there's lots of ways to do that. You can ask people, hey, is this something that you think you're going to apply back at work? Or can you think of a time when something went wrong for you and this would have helped? Or can you think of, thinking about this experience today, is there one thing that you can take away from it? The most effective interactivity happens where? In our brains, right? Cognition, thinking, reflecting, experience. This is how we internalize and make our own meaning and sense out of things. So activity doesn't always have to be about simulation and doing. Get people to think, how confident are you that you will be able to execute this back on the job? How confident are you with this new skill? Really get reflection built into your experiences. Super powerful, easy to do. It could just be text on a screen, right? You can just ask the question, do you see a pink elephant? Right? And now we all see a pink elephant. So I can ask a question just with text. I don't even have to click. I can make you think and reflect and learn something and make sense and meaning out of it. And then we are having an impact. Excellent. So now, tip number 4 here is about how can we get personal in our e-learning experiences. Sometimes we're working at scale. Many of you have large numbers of employees that you're trying to reach. We've designed training for companies with 30,000, 80,000 people. How do you create a personal experience that's not going to be one size fits all for everyone? Here's another quote from the Elucidate survey. I have to learn things that don't relate to my department. It's so time consuming and inefficient. So if you have one annual required compliance course that everybody at your company has to take, and yet a lot of the scenarios don't match to your job role, or that policy doesn't even, I'm a customer service rep. I don't need to know about that portion of information security. I just know that I need to keep my password secure. It's really important to tailor the learning experience. You can do that through your learning management systems and using audience profiling. Totara has some really powerful features that allow you to make sure that you're driving the right content to the right people based on their audience profile. But even within a learning experience itself, we can further tailor that experience. 62% of people surveyed said that having relevant content was the most important factor to them in making sure that the learning experience was engaging. Right? Nobody wants their time wasted. All right, so here's another activity. The project on delivering difficult feedback for new managers is for managers who range in experience. So you're going to have some people who are brand new to the role and some people who've been managing for 20 years. But they also work in different settings. I work at an office. She works in a factory. He's on the front line. He's in a gas station. He's at a store, right? But we still want to teach this process of giving difficult feedback to employees. How could you make that learning experience more personalized so it's not sheep dip? I don't know if that will translate. Sheep dip, everyone gets the same experience. We don't want that. So talk amongst yourselves. How can you create a more personalized experience? What are some strategies that you could use? And think about how you can use technology in effective ways to do that. Talk. Small group chats again. I'm making you do all the work. I'll share some more. So upfront diagnostics, right? A test out function, a way to level up so you know where you're at. Menus that give people choice. I really liked the avatar you talked about. So this would be what we would call a role selector. An example I'm thinking of, it's a code of conduct course for BP, so oil and gas company. They have retail, they have office folks, and they have operations, the people who are out on the oil rigs. How each of those audiences applies the code of conduct for BP is going to be really different. So you have an upfront role selector where you pick an avatar that's wearing the clothes that you might wear. They look like you, so you see yourself in that role. And then you can actually have different personalized scenarios. So the scenarios are different based on which role you select. The content could be different based on which role you select. And Adapt, which is a tool that we use a lot at Kineo for developing custom content, we do a lot with role selector. It's a really powerful feature. I do not have to see all of the content that the retail team sees. Contextual examples, again, that's just making sure that you're showing people situations and scenarios that are relevant to them, personal to them. It's nice to be able to, one of the things you had mentioned, Salvador, is, you might want to see how people in your area of the business solve that problem, but wouldn't it be kind of cool to also see how the retail team is handling that problem, because it helps you generate new ideas. So you don't necessarily want to lock people out of seeing that other content experience, because it might generate ideas that they can bring into their part of the business. But you want to be careful with that, because your audience wants short but sweet, so you don't want to overwhelm them too. So it's finding that right mix for who you are. Confidence checks, we talked a little bit about that, a reflective question. How are you feeling about this? Competency-based branching. So interactive video can do a really good job of kind of personalizing experiences, branching activities. This one's really simple, but keeping it conversational. So personalization is talking to you. I am having a conversation with you. When I give advice to our content writers, I say, act as if you are sitting down and having a cup of coffee with someone across a table, and you're having a conversation. And your organization might have a more formal tone, and that's okay. You can still be conversational. Right? You don't have to speak in really stiff business language. Make it feel like someone is having that conversation with you. And then ultimately, you can also have people build a work plan. So have an action plan. Let's say you're teaching a marketing skill, and the actual skill is, at the end of this program, you will have a marketing plan, and you actually create work product in the course. That could be something that you're doing in the e-learning tool itself, or you could have them write it out, or open a Word document that you formatted for them. It doesn't have to be hard technology to give people an actionable item that they can take out into the real world. I've now personalized the content for myself because I'm really thinking about how I can apply it. I don't know, maybe for the store window dressers that we were talking about, part of that program could be they are creating their own maps for how they're going to dress the windows. And now you need to go talk with your manager, right? Lars talked about that, getting managers involved in the learning experience and share that work plan with them. So there are so many ways to personalize content experiences. It's really important to do. It's not one size fits all, especially at large organizations where we're trying to scale. We want to make sure that people are seeing the right information to help them perform and do their jobs better, right? Ultimately, that's the impact we're trying to have, not just sharing tons of content. So here's an example of building a personalized plan. So for this one, your delegation style, you're thinking about how frequently you delegate, what's your style, tell us about any problems that you encounter. Some tools allow you to print this out in the tool, but again, you could do this as a Word document, an interactive PDF. There's lots of ways to do this. Have people write it down on a sticky note or a notepad. It's okay to create a self-paced e-learning program and ask people to use a pencil. All right, that's okay. We have notebooks. Many of you are taking notes right now. Encourage people to take notes while they're going through your e-learning program so that they can internalize it and make their own sense and meaning out of the content. Checking knowledge. So this is a Kineo example for Whitbread. Whitbread? Is that how you say it? It's a UK company, Whitbread. Yeah, so upfront diagnostic questions, check your knowledge. So this one says, which of these is the strongest password? And then it gives you a whole bunch of different examples. One says, open sesame, exclamation point. And one says, 11223344. Right, so we have all these questions that some of them kind of softballs, easy questions. Some can be harder. Based on how you answer, we can then customize the course menu. You don't need to learn how to tidy up. You clearly have that down. You answered all those questions correctly. So tailoring the experience through that upfront diagnostic, which was what Salvador was talking about. I still need to go through these things today. Oh, and look, here we are, wrapping up. All right, so we talked about a bunch of different things today. We talked about why audience needs matter, the ingredients of engagement, how to ensure that it's What are the words I used? Relevant, personalized, applicable, on-the-job learning, all those things. Keep that really hard of mind. We don't just want to push content at people. We want to build relevant practice so that they can take it out onto the job. How to use activities in meaningful ways, and ultimately some ways to get personal. So if we think about your own work, here I'm gonna do this, right? I'm gonna ask you to reflect right now on your own work experience. What's one thing from what I shared today that you want to implement today? What are the barriers to doing so, if any? And what would be the benefit of overcoming that? So find your little buddy group again and consider these questions. What's one thing that you can take out into the world tomorrow, next week, to transform what you're doing? Wonderful. Yeah, that's a whole nother, we could spend a whole days talking about AI and how to pull that in. I will say, we work with a lot of big organizations, and Lars, I think, would echo the same. AI, people are talking about it, but because the barriers are still so high, a lot of organizations are not implementing it. So people are playing with ChatGPT on their phone or experimenting, and that's super important. But in terms of like adopting, an AI strategy and having a governance approach in place, many organizations don't have that. So I see a lot of companies kind of going, what's going to happen with AI right now? And it's definitely a game changer. We kind of all know that. And for those of you who are creating instructional designed solutions, it might feel a little scary because what's going to happen to my job? An AI bot's going to take it away. What? That's unnerving. And whole industries and segments may disappear because of AI. AI does have that huge power to personalize. So I know Rodrigo and the team are experimenting and implementing for some clients chatbots, which are using a large language model, training your chatbot on your SOPs, your standard operating procedures, your policies, training the chatbot to do that so employees can ask questions that are trained on your content. That's going to be hugely personalized, right? And that's speaking to that performance support at the moment of need. So when I need the information, I can get the right information. That's going to be very, very transformative. Articulate, who uses Articulate Storyline Suite, right? They've just announced AI tools, right? What? Back to what Lars said earlier, though, garbage in, garbage out. These AI tools are going to enable us to create so much content so quickly, and a lot of it's going to be junk. Or it's just going to be too much and overwhelming. So the role of the human beings will continue to be, on the learning and development teams, will be to help sift through that noise, to work alongside the AI to ensure that what you're doing is actually creating effective experiences and not just putting more noise out there for employees to, now what do I look at? So much content. There's so much about AI that is really unknown yet. A lot of uncertainty for all of us in this field. We can have a support group later and we can all, give each other hugs and say, I don't know what's going to happen next. So who else has another key takeaway from today? What's one thing you're going to do differently? This is great hearing what people are, how you're going to incorporate this. Anyone? Yes.
Ours is very basic. Ours is very basic, but get to know our audience better.
Get to know your audience better. Amazing. So have you heard of design thinking? Mm-hmm. Right? So design thinking is a whole kind of design methodology. It starts with understanding your audience and doing user personas. So you might have new hire Harry and come up with a persona for him and
Empathize with them.
And you empathize with them, yeah. So you can. There are tools out there for user personas that you could fill in, and what motivates this person, and what are their barriers for success. Understand those different people, and then think about what's the right experience for those audience segments. Yeah, that's really powerful. Great.
Thank you.
Very tactical too. Yeah, I think lots of tips to take away. Definitely, we don't want the Bible. my mantra has always been, and maybe this can be the, a key takeaway for you all. I should have learned how to say this in Spanish, I'm sorry. It's all about the people, man. So we are designing self-paced e-learning experiences for human beings. And it's really easy to be sitting back in your office and just shoving all the content in that the subject matter expert has shared with you. We are designing for human beings. We want to treat them like human beings, speak to them like human beings, respect them like human beings, and just keep that human-centered focus at the core of everything that you're doing. You will have an impact if you keep that key principle in mind. It's all about the people, man. Elucidat has this amazing, engaging e-learning course that you can take for free. Go check that out on their website. Kinia, we have a design for results guide. Have you translated that into Spanish? Yeah. That lays down a lot of the kind of key ideas and principles we've shared today for getting to understand your audience, really understanding the business goals, where you're going. It has been my pleasure to speak with you all, have this augmented experience with translators. I feel as if I'm able to communicate with you. It's wonderful. So translation as a personalization tool, right? Right? That's amazing. So personalizing and localizing content for different segments, we need to do that too. And thank you to our wonderful translators for making that experience possible.